all about Vision 2023. Create a plan to have your best year ever. Wow, what a promise, huh? Here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm not responsible for writing your plan. You are. So today I'm going to challenge you to be ambitious and aspirational with next year. And yet at the same time is to give you some structure for how you can actually get some organization and a strategy in place for creating the kind of year that you want to have next year. Now, I know that that might sound like an interesting promise, but I will. There's a ton of space in this process for you to tailor it to your liking. I bet one of the questions you already have is this. Well, the best year ever, does that mean like as a parent or as a significant other or a partner? Or does that mean as a boss or a leader? To which I would say all of the above, and it largely depends on what's most important for you. And there's space for you to do that in today's process. Preparing for this webinar, you'll find out more about me here in a minute. A lot of you already know me, so I won't say a whole lot about myself. I'm here to serve you. I was looking through some photos. This is what kind of spurred this thought for this webinar in the cloud a few weeks ago, and I came across a picture that my wife had taken from at the end of 2019, leading into 2020. And I found it fairly comical and ironic given what the last 2.5 years has held. And here's what the picture was. 2019, thanks for the lessons. 2020, let's do this. Now, my wife's not into self-help and, I'm not, she's into growth and she's into learning, but she's not into like the self-help crap is what I'll say. So at some point in time, I asked her about this and she said, yeah, I remember I was feeling particularly inspired at the end of 2019, moving into 2020. We had just had our now 3-year-old son. He's our second of 3. Yeah, we had a quarantine surprise, our third. And my wife is saying I was feeling really particularly inspired while I had some time away from just sort of life to be on vacation and visiting family. But boy, we had no clue what was coming for us in 2020. And whatever your experience was over the last 2.5 years, right? We've all had a journey, needless to say, whether it's business or personal. But bottom line is that there's learning for us to harvest from that experience and from that challenge. And I just found this almost, just fairly ironic, somewhat comical, because this is the visual that I started to use at the end of 2020 with a lot of the large intact healthcare teams that I was working with for a 30,000 person system here in Columbus, Ohio. It's like year in review. You know that meme that's out there is like how it started, how it's going. Well, this is exactly how I think my 2020 and 2021 went. I'm happy to report that 2022 felt fairly different. But nonetheless, oftentimes it's this bird's eye view that feels more calm than when we're actually in it. Bonus points using the chat. Anybody recognize what this visual is? Does anybody know where this is? Put it in the chat. Gauley River, you got it, Julie. Yeah, so this is the New River Gorge in West Virginia. And I turned 40 in July, and 2 of my best friends from high school and I went down and we spent an overnight rafting this. It's so peaceful from above. It's so peaceful when you're just looking down on it. And when you get into the water, it's a completely different experience. Does anybody want to take a guess at how fast this river flows in miles per hour? It's another bonus quiz question here. How fast in miles per hour do you think the Gauley River flows? I'm looking at chat off to my side. Let's see what you got. Any guesses? How fast does the Gauley River and the New River Gorge flow? No guesses, none whatsoever. Do you think it's like 10 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, or like 100 miles an hour? Any guesses? 15. Even that, Brooke, is still, Jess, it feels like 50 if you're looking at the picture on the right, for sure. But even 15 is too high of a guess. At any point in time, this river flows between 3 and 7 miles an hour. That's it. It's not that fast. But when you get in it and you have to navigate around the obstacles and you have to figure out how to actually make the current work for you and work with others to navigate through it, it feels like it's about 1,000,000 miles an hour. And I don't know if this is true for you or to what extent it was, but that's what the past few years has felt like for many people, myself included. And so, one of the best things that any of us can do when it feels like things are turbulent is to consider, how am I doing? What do I want? And what's my plan for getting what I want? And that's basically what we're going to cover today. So, let's check in with you here. Right? We're talking about 2023, but we are finishing 2022. And I bet many of you are in a reflective place or you're ready to start being reflective. So I'm just curious, using the chat, what's a word or phrase you would use to describe this past year that you've had? A word or a phrase, or maybe even a metaphor. And I want you just to write it down somewhere. It's fine if you drop it in chat. I'm going to ask you to do that. But what's most important is that you're actually just taking a moment to reflect. Word or phrase that you would use to describe this past year. I'm going to give you a moment. There are pauses in here for the action for you. After you've written that down, I want you just to close your eyes for a moment, take a deep breath of air in, and exhale. Do it one more time. Take a deep breath of air in, hold it, and exhale. You can open your eyes. And I'd like for you to just appreciate all the effort that has gone into that word. So whether it's a quote unquote negative word or a positive word, is to acknowledge the work you've put in over the past 11 months, 11 and a half months. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share it in the chat. There's no judgment on it. In some ways, around emotional intelligence work, this is just a tool called naming it. Change. Thank you, Luann. Change. What do other people have? Reset. Mine's adventure. Haley, rebuilding. Thank you. I love the variation. Patrick, chaotic. Thank you for that, Patrick. Contentment, Scott. Good to see you, Scott. Roller coaster, Jennifer. Challenging, Jess. Gotcha. Yeah. Whatever that word is and everything that goes into it, there's a lot of learning to harvest from that word. I have learned so much about myself in 2022 in ways that I couldn't have even planned, despite having a plan for this year at the end of 2021. Yeah. Thank you, Julie. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Uncertainty and unexpected provision. It's often useful for us to look back because it can serve as great learning for what we need in the next chapter. So we're going to do a little bit of that today. Thank you. Here's a question to ask too. This is just merely a reflection question. To what extent are you experiencing the life you intended for yourself in 2022? This is a reflection. I'm not going to ask you to put this in chat. You know, over the course of maybe the Thanksgiving holiday, or when you get a quiet moment, is to write down a little reflection on this. This could be a good writing prompt. Hey, to what extent did I experience this year in the way that I intended back at the beginning of 2022? And if your answer to that is, well, gee, I didn't really set an intention, then today is all about an invitation for you to be more intentional with the next year ahead. You're already here, so we might as well do some work on this. So today's big idea for the session is you get to choose how to make your life count. We all do. I know we all have different circumstances. We all have different levels of privilege and not privilege. So there are a lot of circumstances that can shift and change this. But at the end of the day, we have a chance to choose how to make our life count. Viktor Frankl, if you haven't read this book, it's a deep book, but Viktor Frankl is, he was a social psychologist who survived the Holocaust, and he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And what he would contend is, you know, during the time of Sigmund Freud, Freud would have contended, we are all just left to our own devices. We seek pleasure. And what Frankl would contend is actually we don't seek pleasure, we seek meaning. So this is all about how do we seek and make meaning for ourselves and our lives related to the dent that we want to make on the world. But without a plan, it's easy to lose focus and drift. If you do not have a plan, you will be like an empty life raft just traveling down the New River Gorge. You'll bang into rocks, you'll crash all over the place, and you're just going to go with the current. You actually have a chance to pick up that paddle and steer where you want to take it. So here's how we're going to do this today. 3 components to plan your year. Most people say, hey, webinars should be designed to just tell people the why. Don't tell them the how, so that then they got to work with you if they want to do the how. And I actually think that's a bunch of crap. I really do. My desire is to give you as much value today as possible. And here's how we're going to hit it. I'm going to help you reflect. I'm going to help you clarify what you want. And then I'm going to help you create a plan for how you go after it. And at the end, if you want to help, if you want to help yourself go further with the plan, I'm going to tell you about how you can opt into a workshop that I'm leading. But we're really going to cover some ground on these 3 pieces. Okay. So let's reflect. We've already done this a little bit. So the past is such a good teacher for us because we can think about how we've shown up, what's worked for us and what hasn't. We can think about the things that trip us up. And so we're just going to take a moment with these prompts. Thinking over the past. By the way, drop in chat. Has anybody stopped to reflect on the past year already here in late November? Just say yes or no. Oh yes, Brooke. Brooke, I know. I got that. Yeah. Love talking about that a few weeks ago with you. I appreciate you sharing it. Absolutely. Okay. So a lot of you have, right? Mid-year reviews, end of year reviews. These tend to be something that help us reflect back, at least from a work perspective. I would say there's a more like a more complete approach to do this with by thinking about our lives as well and some domains of our lives. And yeah, Julie, I'm with you. Usually I'm the last week of the year. Most of my coaching and teaching is designed for myself first before I share it with others. And so this is a part of what I'm doing for myself today. So thank you. Thank you for being here. So I just think a few reflections to think on is, what are some key highlights that you've experienced this year? And I want you to write down 1 or 2 of them. I'm talking personally, professionally, spiritually, financially, from a health perspective, a friend's perspective, a community. It's wide open, everybody. It's wide open for you to choose how you want to go about it. What are some key highlights from this year? Just want you to write those down for yourself. This is for you. Yeah, that's great, Brooke. Thank you. And, I love what you're hitting on is times of change and times of transition is an opportunity for us to begin to reflect and learn. It's like, what can I bring forward into this next chapter of my journey, whatever that next chapter looks like? Really appreciate you sharing. Cool. So the next prompt, thank you for sharing, everybody. So the next prompt, if you haven't written it already, is what are some key lowlights or challenges that you've encountered this year? Maybe just get down 1 to 3 of those. 1 to 3. What are key lowlights or challenges? Those could be 2 different things, by the way, for any of you from this past year. Take your time. Okay. So maybe you've got some thoughts. I will share first, and then I'll invite anyone who wants to share. It might feel a tad vulnerable. I get that. And so choose your boundaries, choose how you want to participate here today. That's up to you. I will say that there's a couple lowlights. One is that we lost my brother-in-law to a battle with cancer, a relatively short battle with cancer and complications from that in August. And frankly, it was shocking to our family. It still is. And it's been really, really, really hard. Another challenge I would care to share is also a key highlight, which was in April, I quit my job at Ohio Health full time. Good to see some former colleagues here. And so it's just been challenging to learn how to run a business full time, not as a side hustle. And it's also been a lot of fun. It's been a blast, right? It's like, turns out you can just plan a webinar and have people show up and serve them during the middle of a quote unquote work day. And it's really awesome. So that's also comes with some challenges around family boundaries and working out of my basement with 3 young kids. That's just been such huge learning for me. So you'll hear more about that perhaps as we go through this framework. Anybody else care to share either lowlights or challenges? And yet I bet many or a few of us on the call have experienced some version of transition like the way you're describing it. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else want to share? Yeah, see, Julie, I did the same thing this summer. That's right, Julie, you did. Yeah, so no desire to share the same recipe. So listen, the reason why sometimes this isn't about like trying to, talk about all the sad or hard things, but a lot of times many of us will avoid even thinking and reflecting on the learnings that come from the challenges. Every story worth telling, and we're going to talk about the power of storytelling as it relates to creating a plan. Every great story has conflict. And the conflict is really about the hero of the story overcoming the conflict or working through it. It creates a tension for the viewer of the movie. And so we're going to lean into some of the conflicts that all of us have been through that actually creates some challenge and some aspirational transformation. What that means is to set a plan for how you want the next year to go, even if you don't have control over all the circumstances. In other words, how do you take control of your life raft as it floats down the river, knowing fully well that you can't stop the river and you certainly can't go upstream very far, for very long. And so the third prompt before we jump into the framework is, what have I learned about myself? So maybe write that down. What's something you've learned or that you appreciate that you have grown into over the past year? By the way, if you're a leader of people, these are great questions for your one-on-one touch bases and your end of year reviews even. If you lack having a human side to the annual performance reviews, here are 3 questions for you to just steal. Go for it. So how have you learned about yourself this past year? Take a moment. And who wants to share? Maybe from 2 people. What have you learned about yourself this year? And I'd love to see other responses in the chat. Just get active in the chat here. Doesn't mean you've got to share a whole lot of specifics if you just sort of want to protect yourself. I get that. But drop in chat or maybe a couple people come off mute. I'll go first. I learned that I'm risk averse and I sell myself short more often than I need to, which you better believe is information that I'm using to equip myself for the year ahead. That's one thing for sure. Here's the other thing. I love working and I can get really good at compartmentalizing work from family. That's been a learning this year. Boy, it never really gets fully illuminated, at least for me, until you're a business owner. So what's everybody got? What do you have? You want to share any learnings about yourself? Brooke,
I'd be happy.
I love it because you already know where I'm going to go with this, which is, so how do you take that information as you move into your new role and you equip yourself? Doesn't mean you're going to overcome it every single time, but that you've got a sense for it and go, this is a pattern I know about myself. How can I create a plan to overcome it? Yeah. And if you have resources who you can tap into to help support you through that, of course, you know who to call.
I might know a few.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We
Thanks,
got to
Dave.
surround our, yeah, you bet. And we have to surround ourselves with people to help create the story and write the story that we want to go for. Haley, thank you. Enneagram 3, solid issues that are also major strengths elsewhere. Yes. And you're efficient at using those strengths along with your issues together. I know, as an Enneagram 3, efficiency is all about your superpower there. Okay, cool. Anybody else want to share, chat, or even just come off mute and say it out loud? It's so much easier when I can let someone in and they can support me. If that resonates for you, write it down. And I bet it does for many of you. It does for me. Julie, thank you for that. So these learnings they can illuminate a couple things. One, what's important to us. Two, habits and patterns that can sabotage our progress, whatever progress means. And three, we can use it to help us also share or be willing to share with other people about our challenges. Now, I would choose those people wisely and carefully. There should be some kind of trust that you have extended to them and vice versa. But that's one of the ways that you can start to create an ecosystem of what I'd say is like a satisfying, fulfilling year. I think that's a really important part of it. So let's talk about where we go from here. The reflection is just one component of this. We've got two other components. So I want to talk about clarifying the desires. In other words, like, what do you want? And I don't know if this is true or not for any of you, but gosh, I talk to so many leaders and I coach enough leaders to know that even if I ask and someone goes, "Hey, I want to explore coaching with you," and they get on the call for the first call and I say, "Okay, so what do you want to work on?" And they go, "I don't know." Or they'll go, "I want to work on emotional intelligence." And I go, "Okay, great. What do you want?" And oftentimes it's a blank stare. "Well, I don't know. You tell me what I want." And I'm like, as an executive coach, that ain't my business. Frankly, my business is helping you identify what you want and then help you get there, help you help yourself get there. And so these five components, these five sectors or segments of your life might be a good place to start. What do you want in your career? What do you want for yourself health wise? Something related to family, something related to friends or community, and maybe something spiritual. And I think what's important to note is you can have goals or you can have desires for all five of these pieces and components, but they're really hard to keep track of if you don't write them down. But you can't write them down if you're not clear what they are in terms of being measurable. And so I'm not going to give you a bunch of examples about this. I'd rather you try to sort of like wrestle through what these might be for you. Haley, it sounds like very clearly you had a health goal this year. And like you're on track, like you're making progress toward it. And you probably had a plan that you put in place to go out there and get it. As an Enneagram 3, I know you did. I know that, and so so for all of us, I would say at any point in time, these might be different rank order between career, health, family, friends, and spiritual. So what are your top priorities and make them measurable? And I just want to give you a moment and a pause to just put like top 3 or even put a top 5 ranking for all of these. What would be 1? What would be 2, 3, 4, and 5? But they're all 1. I got news for you, my friend. They can't all be number 1. It's really hard to do. But there is a way to tie these all together, and that's where we're going to end today when we get toward the end of our session. So you got a rank order. Let's talk a little bit more about how you go in depth with creating a plan for 2023. Let's start first with the problem. The problem has everything to do with direction, has everything to do with clarity. It goes back to that slide that we were just on. So quick pop quiz. What do you think these 3 items have in common? Don't overthink this one. Airplane, sailboat, car. Drop it in chat. Transportation. You got it, Haley. Yeah. Ways to get somewhere. Good. That's great, Patrick. Yeah. They get you from one place to the next. Now we introduce this. We're just going to broadly say people. Can you still identify what they have in common? I love asking this question because I get so many creative answers, and I haven't thought of this deeply. Still the same. Yeah. People can help you get from one place to the next. Yeah. Ways to get somewhere. They all move people. Yeah. Every single one of these items need direction. Now, some of you can say, well, an airplane and maybe even a car, I think boats, they all have autopilot, and so do people, right? We can all have autopilots, but here's the problem. Sometimes we often just fall asleep at the wheel. And I don't know if this is true for you. It is for me. I have certainly fallen asleep at the wheel in some of these domains in my own life. I certainly have. Whether it's health or spiritually, I feel like spiritually coming out of the pandemic and not going to church for a really long time, one of our family's goals is actually reestablish a new church home here in Columbus. That's a goal for us in 2023. I'll show you how we got there as we start to talk about more of this. But all of those modes of transportation, including people, will drift if we don't give it direction. And it's true for us. And speaking of drifting, I don't know if you know this or not. Airplanes. Did you know that airplanes are designed to just be perpetually brought back on track? It's called the 1 in 60 rule. Now, if there are any pilots, I butcher this all the time. If there are any pilots on the call, you can reserve the right to correct me here. But airplanes go off track all the time. And so that's why headings become really important. But pilots, one of their most fundamental pieces of training is to know how to calculate the correct heading manually, because they have to know what happens if the plane goes off course. So basically, it's like 1 degree of heading equals 60-mile difference with where the plane arrives. And there's actually some tragic stories in history of pilots not calculating this correctly and tragically crashing their airplane and killing many people. So airplanes, and any pilot will tell you the 1 in 60 rule. They'll know it. If you know a pilot, you're at Thanksgiving with a pilot, ask them about the 1 in 60 rule. I promise you they know it, because I don't think you can get licensed without knowing this rule. The reason I say this is because there's really two pieces that are really important along with that analogy: destination and the route. So how do you want to get where you're going after you've determined where you're going? Where you're going is such a broad phrase, I know that. So let me give you a tool here. You can take one of these 5 domains or all 5 of them, and you can use this sentence. This comes from Business Made Simple. Don Miller is an author who wrote a book, How to Grow a Small Business, and a book called Hero on a Mission. But the phrase is this: I will accomplish X by Y because of Z. So as it relates to your career, your health, your family, friends, your spiritual, or just overall, what is it you want to accomplish? When do you want to accomplish it by? And why is it important for you? Right before this call, I was doing some business coaching with a husband-wife chiropractor team. They own a chiropractor practice in Indianapolis. And they had something like, in 2023, we will increase our patient visits to X number by the end of 2023. Because we believe that our city deserves to live an abundant life the way God intended us to. It's their why. Doesn't have to excite you, doesn't have to excite me, but it excites them. But they got clear on what the directive was, when they wanted to accomplish it by, and why it was important. But by the way, just a little psychology. For those of you who are in sales, and I know some of you are, I see you on the call. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but research would show that we are, as humans, more motivated to avoid pain than to actually gain pleasure. We are more motivated to avoid pain than gain pleasure. So if my doctor said, Jason, by losing 30 pounds, you'll get to enjoy more time with your kids, versus, Jason, if you don't lose 30 pounds, you're going to have less time with your kids. By the way, my doctor has not said that to me because he's too nice, but that comes to another one of my goals for 2023. All right. So is this making sense so far? Just put a Y, or, well, you can't do a thumbs up, but you can do a thumbs up on video, but just put a Y in the chat or in for no if it doesn't. So, there's a thumbs up. Okay, I got you. I see the thumbs up. Awesome, Julie. Thank you. Cool. All right. So that's the tool I'm going to leave you with, because we're going to write a more of a macro level, but you've got this tool. And if you want to take a snapshot on your phone of the screen, feel free, or a screenshot, go for it. Let's talk about how you put a plan in place. Here are some big questions to ask first. So the strategy is all about, how do I go after it? If I've got my heading, I will accomplish X by Y because of Z, then it's about knowing how you're going to get there. But there's 3 questions I want you to ask yourself first. These are like honest to God questions for yourself about your motivation. How willing am I to write an ambitious story for my next year? I had to ask myself that in 2021 when my friend Bryce said, "What's your revenue goal for Anchored Leadership in 2022?" And I'm like, "Well, it's only a side hustle now." Now, it was really a full-time business on top of a full-time job. And he said, "Well, how willing are you to actually go after what it is that you want?" And I had to answer that honestly. And I'm like, I'm really willing. And he's like, "You're hesitating. What's the cause for your hesitation?" And it was, "I don't want to lose my family in the midst of pursuing a job for myself that I've always dreamed of doing." So this is a really honest question for us to ask ourselves. How willing am I to write an ambitious story? What's my comfort to discomfort threshold? It's like, what's the ratio of how willing you are to be uncomfortable versus comfortable? And by the way, you don't get bonus points for leaning into the discomfort. I actually think you get bonus points for being honest about what this threshold is. And then thirdly is, how much urgency am I willing to create? This helps you dial in if this is an entire 2023 goal or if it's a Q1 or a Q2 goal. And I would break it down into 90-day sprints for what it's worth. Okay. So how do we get there? Through story. Storytelling is a sense-making mechanism. Story is one of the best ways that we can keep attention. And it's also one of the best ways that we as communicators can help people make meaning of things. So we're going to rely on Hollywood screenwriters and the tools they use to help you come up with something called a narrative or a story narrative for your entire 2023. Ready to go? You ready to get after it and finish strong here for today's session? All right, you're still here. So here it is. If you were to choose your adventure for the next chapter, there are some questions to ask is, who am I and what's my story? Would I watch the movie of my life, and am I writing a story worth watching? Some of you on the call, because I know your story, at least over the past year, and you've shared it, maybe a part of what you were asking yourself was, is this all there is? Or have I created such a story for myself that's only related to X that it doesn't allow the other components of my life to actually come into play? In other words, your story became like a single narrative instead of having all of the characters in play that you know are important for your life. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. So this comes from a storytelling tool called the Story Brand 7-part framework. We use it for marketing and messaging, and some of you have heard me talk about it from a communication standpoint. Every single movie follows Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, and StoryBrand has boiled it down to 7 steps. So here it is in a nutshell. Basically, at any movie, and you could think of any movie you'd like. As a matter of fact, while I'm talking about this, drop your favorite movie of all time in the chat, and I'll try to work with one and give you a little example. So every movie follows 7 key elements. First, within the first 10 minutes, we're introduced to a character or the hero of the movie, which, by the way, so good, Patrick, who, by the way, is the weakest character of the entire story, the hero. Why? Because they actually haven't experienced transformation yet. That's what the whole movie is about a character transformation. The Descendants, Tracy, it's good. Okay, so the hero or the character has a problem. First 10 minutes, Keanu Reeves finds out there's a bomb on the bus. What else is there? I don't want to give away some of the examples I'm going to use. Mirabelle in Encanto discovers or is told that she doesn't have has a gift that everybody else has. Moana wants to get off the island. She wants to explore a boundary that she's not allowed to cross. What other movies you got? Come on, drop them in the chat, please. So a character has a problem, and soon into the movie, the character meets a guide. Andy Dufresne meets Red. All right, am I right, Patrick? Descendants, oh, you got me on this. I should know this because my 8-year-old is so into it, but I don't know that one very well. So you might have to do some work here, Tracy. Yeah. Okay. 'Tis the Season. Gotcha, Brooke. Nightmare Before Christmas. Good. So somewhere in there, the character has a problem. They meet a guide, and the guide has a plan. The plan calls the hero into action. And if the hero takes the action, it ends in success. If they don't, it ends in failure. And so if you think about this, Katniss Everdeen had a problem where District 12 was being threatened. She met a guide, Haymitch, Been there, done that. Hamish gave her a plan. Just figure out how to lean into your strengths and play the game. You don't want to play the game, you have to play the game if you want to survive. So he called her into action, fight for District 12. That ended in success, or if it wouldn't have, then it would have been crushed. They would have been crushed. Greatest Showman, Pretty Woman, so good, so good. You could story brand every single one of these movies and write out these components. Think about Star Wars. I'm surprised this one didn't come up. So Luke Skywalker, his problem was that the evil empire was after him, and he met a guide, a couple guides, depending on which one you're watching, Yoda and Obi-Wan. Their plan was to help Luke trust the Force. And so what did he have to do? He had to learn how to fight. He had to learn how to use the Force. As he learned how to use the Force, the success was that the Death Star was destroyed. And if he didn't succeed, it's that the rebellion would have been crushed. Every single movie follows this prescription. I'm sorry if I've ruined movies for you forever, but it's predictable. Why? Because a long time ago, these ancient storytelling tenets have proven that it's how people keep attention. Out of that, once the story is created, then what movie writers know is if they're going to summon the kinds of investment to actually get the movie made, they have to go in and pitch the movie. And they use a tool called a story summary or a log line. It's this is the paragraph you read on Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus. Patrick and Jennifer, there you go. Disney Plus. Make sure everybody you subscribe. Come on. And so if you notice this, then it gives you a sense of what the story is about in one paragraph. So I'm going to show you how easy it is to guess the movie when you've got a clear paragraph. Okay, you ready? So get your chat fingers ready. You're going to drop it in chat. Here we go. Here's the first movie I want you to guess using its log line. Two imprisoned men bond over a number of years, finding solace and eventual redemption through acts of common decency. I'm watching the chat. Who's got this? What movie? What movie we got? Come on, chat. No guesses? It's Shawshank. Patrick already said it in here. Shawshank Redemption. Some of you are distracted right now. I know it because this is always the first quickest answer. All right. Are you ready? Here we go. We got like 4 or 5 of these. So here's the next one. Las Vegas set comedy centered around 3 groomsmen who lose their about to be buddy. Yeah, nice. Yeah, I can see that, Sheena. So they lose their about to be wed buddy during their drunken misadventures, then must retrace their steps in order to find him. Bingo. Maybe it's lagging. There you go. Y'all got it. Raul, you got it. Nice. Cool. That's The Hangover. It's good Thanksgiving watch. There you go. A boy who communicates with spirits seeks the help of a disheartened child psychologist. 6th Sense. You got it, man. We're going to keep it rolling. Nice job, Patrick. Liz. All right. I think it's the last one. It's second to last. In order to restore power to the city, monsters have to scare children, so they scream. Sheena, Haley, Jennifer. This, if you haven't watched it, you're a terrible human being and you should watch it this weekend. Monsters, Inc. You got it. You got it. Last one. Following the Normandy landings, a group of U.S. soldiers goes behind enemy lines to retrieve a paratrooper whose brothers have been killed in action. It's good, Patrick. I see that. Monsters, Inc. is on Disney Plus all day, every day, as often as you want to watch it. Saving Private Ryan. Yeah, nice. When you've got a really clear storyline, when you really know what the story is about, here's the cool thing that starts to happen. Saving Private Ryan doesn't have 18 different side stories. The moment that we have a clear log line or story summary is the moment that we are clear on what we write into the scenes. Making sense when I say it that way? Could you imagine Jason Bourne? Could you imagine Jason Bourne being like, I know there's a few love interests in there, but if he's like, I want to go back to MIT, pun intended, by the way, for Matt Damon, I want to go back to MIT and get my PhD in physics. And while I'm at it, I actually want to start an NGO and help feed orphans in Africa. No, that would be off the story script. It'd be off the storyline, and it would lose the listeners or the viewer's interest. So that's why it becomes really important to get clear on what you want and then get clear on how you actually write what you want. Any story worth watching as we come down the home stretch here, get your pencils ready because I'm going to have you do a writing prompt. Any story worth watching defines an ambition. Okay. So the conflict is that Monsters Inc. is they must power the city. They have to keep producing power. How do they do that? By scaring kids. So the ambition is that we want to continue. I want to continue powering our city because I feel the pressure to do this, but I don't want to scare kids anymore. That was Sully's sort of, existential crisis. So the challenge that had to have been overcome was all about how can I still help power the city, but also destroy the evil of scaring kids in their own rooms at night. And then thirdly, it has to inspire or help others. This comes down to Viktor Frankl's framework called logotherapy. Man's Search for Meaning. He's the author. We must have an ambition. We have to have a key project, which is a challenge that must be overcome, and we somehow have to inspire or help others. Otherwise, it's not a story worth telling or watching. If we're the only ones who get the benefit from it, then it's probably not as inspiring to you either. So if you're floating down this river, you might as well get in the raft, grab a paddle, and start to steer where you want it to go. So here's one of the best tools that you can do, and this is like pay dirt for you being here today. If you want to write a story worth living, plan a year worth having, and crafting a vision for your next chapter, then you get a chance to actually pick up the pen and do some writing. And this is where we're going to start to wind down for today. So who are you and what is your story? In other words, in 2023, what are some of the things you want to experience? So I want you to be a movie writer for a moment. Okay. I want you to close your eyes and, I'll hold the space for you here. So with your eyes closed, I want you to take a nice deep breath of air in, let it go. And I want you to set your sights with your eyes closed still on the year ahead, 2023. Think about what you've learned in 2022, this past year. Think about, what served you and what hasn't. And for the next year ahead, I'd like for you to see a movie of your life playing out in 2023. Thinking about the following: career and work, your health, your spiritual component of your life, whatever that means. I didn't say religion. Keep that in mind, but your spiritual component, your friends and community, your family. Take a moment. Take a deep breath of air in, let it out again. Come all the way back into the space, open your eyes. And I want you just to tag what came to mind as you were thinking about that very short reflection. So who are you and what is your story summary? Put yourself as the main character. Write it in third person, as strange as that sounds. All of our English teachers and professors would be, aghast that we're doing it in third person. But for the year ahead, by this time next year, who will you have become? What adventure will you have lived, and what is worth pursuing? I want you to take 3 minutes. Actually, we're going to do 2 minutes to fast write this, because this is just getting you started for some homework as the year ends. 2 minutes. I'll put 2 minutes on the clock. You're just writing. Mine might say something like, a new entrepreneur. I'll give you an example here in a minute, but it's like a new entrepreneur and father of 3 finally learns how to balance owning a business with running a family. Like that could be a part of my storyline here. Take 2 minutes, fast write it, see what comes up. I want you to send this to me if you'd be willing to. I get inspired. I get fired up by seeing what people come up with. If you want to drop it in chat as we wrap up today's webinar, feel free. But I'd love for you to email these to me, because this is a part of why I do what I do, frankly, is helping people get clear on your plan for the year ahead. I want you to be massively successful in your terms, whatever that means. So if you want to drop them in chat, I'd love to hear those. there's a couple things to think about. Now, it's not going to be done, right? So here's how this works is you start to get clear on your story summary. You get clear on your story summary, and then you're going to go back and read it and look at it. And I want you to scrutinize it. I want you to ask if it's intentional and specific enough. And the first question I want you to ask, though, is, am I daring to be ambitious and to dream this? Much like my friend Bryce asked me last year and challenged me with, you're not being ambitious enough with the goals you're setting for your company and for your life. I love being an entrepreneur. It's not about, damn the man, I got to get out of corporate America. I actually, that's exactly why I stayed as long as I did. I loved my team. I loved my organization. I loved the people I worked with. I did. But it's not a part, it was only a journey. It was only a chapter in my journey for what I felt called to. And this is what I feel called to. And the vision's still not fully complete. I'm 40 years old. I got a lot of work and a lot of life ahead of me, God willing. And so does everybody on this call. So that's the first question I challenge you with is, are you daring to dream? Couple approaches to think about here. Start big and work backwards. You notice I wasn't like, well, what's the first thing you want to knock out in the next 60 days? No, it's about starting big and working backwards. I would start with a year from now. What is it that I want to be true? And then starting to break it down into milestones and key accomplishments, whatever accomplishments mean, right? Sometimes it's going to be letting go of accomplishments. The other thing is that you could choose small shifts and be relentlessly consistent with how you get there. Three things I see people struggle with here. They're not ambitious enough. They're not specific enough. They're not dramatic enough, meaning they don't dream enough. And so I'm just encouraging you as you leave the call today, if you're fired up, is to capture this in like a moment of inspiration. Here's the methodology, and here's what this is in its full entirety. The rank order or the process for doing this, some of what we've captured today, starts with an entire framework based upon a workshop called Hero on a Mission. By the way, there's a book out there by Donald Miller called Hero on a Mission. There's no compensation for me telling you about this book, but it's a great book. It's a great read. The 4 roles that we all play in our lives: the hero, villain, victim, guide. If you're a leader, you want to play the guide, not the hero. That's a different webinar for a different day. So the process for living a purposeful life is about casting the vision for the entire story. I didn't freak you out today by starting with this exercise. Tally the number of days you've been on this earth. Now, next, tally the number of days you think you have left on this earth. I didn't start there, but that is a worthwhile exercise because it provides some of that urgency. In the movie Speed, Keanu Reeves knew that he only had a certain amount of time before that bomb blew up on the bus. It's what creates urgency and intrigue in the story. It's also what keeps people from drifting. Not that's like, well, someday I'm going to die, but it's that I only get a certain amount of time to actually make a dent and an impact on those around me. So you cast the vision for your entire story, and then you summarize your next chapters, 10, 5, and 1 year visions. You identify the steps to get there, you execute and experiment, and then you examine and revise. And that's a part of the framework that we would cover in a workshop that I'm going to offer if you're interested. So as you're thinking about these questions, I want to share with you about this workshop. And I'd love to see you drop answers to these questions in the chat. What's one small step you will take before the end of this week or next week, maybe? What will get in the way? How will you plan for this barrier? And who will you include in this step? Just put some thoughts down to that. And if you really want to go further with this, then I am actually on December 5th, I am kicking off a workshop where you would actually create your entire life plan. And it's called Hero on a Mission. It's a workshop that I'm specifically certified to coach and teach. There's a full workbook, exercises where you would actually write your entire life plan from start to finish. We create a 10, a 5, and 1 year vision. It culminates in you creating a daily planner so that every day you would actually wake up and read your life mission, your life statement, and you would know what your highest priority activities are, whether it's work, family, health, whatever it is. You get to determine what it is. But if you go to anchoredleadership.com/hero, sign up before the end of the week, before Thanksgiving, you'll get 30 minutes of free coaching with me one-on-one. either before or after the workshop. It's $397, 90-minute interactive Zoom sessions with a cohort, so you'll learn from others as well. Drop in the chat. I'd love to hear what you learned today and what you're walking out of here hearing and feeling and experiencing. Or come off mute and share. I know we're right at 2:00. Anybody want to share? I hope you found value. I hope more than anything, you've got some structure and inspiration to create an ambitious plan for the next year. You all know how to reach me. If there's anything I do to support you, don't be strangers. Take care.